Okay, this is the continuation of chapter 7. I think we're on slide number 88, if I'm not mistaken. But we're going to finish this chapter today. Okay? All right, here we go. What people will do to get high. Well, there we go. Okay, what people will do to get high. There are no limits to what people will do to get high. People have been known to smoke aspirin, to chew dandelion roots. That's what she's doing on the right there. Drink gasoline. In the strangest thing, they will mix gasoline with orange juice to make a barely palatable concoction that is called Montana Gin. Evidently it tastes pretty bad. Drink rubbing alcohol. Drink hydrogen peroxide. Put Anbesol, which is a topical anesthetic, in your eye. Smoke toad secretions, as strange as that may sound. Mortuaries have to watch their supplies of the fluid they use to embalm bodies, which is formaldehyde, of course. When inhaled, this substance acts as a depressant and a psychedelic, but can also be used to manufacture illicit drugs. When mixed with marijuana, the substance provides a PCP-like effect and is called clickers, clickums, fry, wet, or illy, as weird as that may sound. Anyway, it's the stuff you embalm people with, formaldehyde. That's the same stuff. It's a similar substance to this. What happens to alcohol in your stomach? It turns to acetaldehyde, which is very similar to formaldehyde, as strange as that may seem. So when they say they pickled their liver, they pickled their brains because they drank so much. What they're really saying is that they had all that acetaldehyde in their stomach. Raid, Lysol, and any hairspray are sometimes used for their alcoholic content. We know that because if you've ever been downtown, say Lee or Chin Lee, at Bash's, then people are asking you to buy. Potentially, they're asking you to buy a hairspray so that they can mix it with water. They take a bottle of hairspray and they mix it with a gallon of water and they make something that they can drink. Raid has been used to spray on marijuana to intensify the effects of the marijuana in a concoction known as Canaid. Cannabis, Raid, get it? Kava is a plant found in the South Pacific and South America. The root is crushed, and a milky white exudate is extracted, which is drunk like alcohol. But before they do that, they have to ferment it. And the way they ferment it is to spit into it. So they spit as much spit in. And it's weird because they don't want just any old spit. They want female spit. So the guys will have women, their wives or their girlfriends or their mothers, spit into the stuff, and then they let it sit and ferment, and then they drink it for the alcoholic content. The drink is reputed to have similar effects as alcohol and acts as an anti-anxiety drug. It is said to have an unpleasant flavor and numbs the tongue and lips. And of course, as I just explained, human saliva is used in its preparation. In some Arab countries, camels are force-fed marijuana. After going through the digestive process, the camel dung is smoked for its hashish content. The bufo genus of toads, and the one on the right is a Colorado river toad, produces a psychedelic substance from its pores as a defense mechanism from attack. The toads are sometimes milked, and the resulting substance is smeared on cigarettes and smoked for their psychedelic effect. So potentially, this is in the Sonoran Desert, which is just south of you guys. Potentially, you've seen this toad, this Colorado river toad, or if you live over near the Grand Canyon, I guess. They've got these toads all over the place over there. All natural medications started out as herbal preparations concocted by shamans, medicine men, wizards, or physicians. Some of these herbs merely had a placebo effect, while others have been proven to contain chemical structures that have great benefits for mankind. For example, quinine developed from the cinchona tree to fight malaria. The search for a fountain of youth or merely drugs that will help the individual recover from a hard night of drinking have recently come to the fore as smart drugs, drinks, and nootropics. And these are examples of nootropics, as you can see. Smart drugs, drinks, and nootropics are drugs, nutrients, vitamins, extracts, herbal potions such as ginseng, ginkgo biloba, and caffeine, and amino acids. I take ginseng and ginkgo biloba as supplements every day. I don't know about the fountain of youth part, but it has kept me going up to this point anyway. And here's some drinks that there's one that gives you laser focus. Here's another that gives you lucid dreams. And here's another one that gives you extreme energy and focus. These drugs are reputed to boost intelligence, improve your memory, sharpen your attention, increase concentration, detoxify the body, energize the user, and reverse the aging process. And like I said, I'm not really sure that's working. I'll have to compare myself with my brothers and sister to see if I'm not aging as fast as they are. Of course, they've been through different things that I have, so who knows whether it works or not. New age smart drugs or nootropics include hydrogene, selagelene, vasopressin, 5-HT, modafinil, pyracetam, oxyracetam. They are theoretically improve your learning, they improve your memory consolidation, and they improve your memory retrieval. And of course, that's selagelene hydrochloride at the right, on the right there. Compulsive disorders are repetitive behaviors that the individual appears not to have any control over. They come in two categories, either impulse control disorders or compulsive disorders that have no other have their own classification. Impulse control disorders include compulsive gambling and hair pulling. Compulsive disorders that have their own classification: overeating, shopping, sexual behavior, internet use, watching television, pathological lying, shoplifting, and fire setting. The lady on the right is twirling her hair to the point that she's pulling it out. There's some really nasty pictures out there about what people have done to their own heads by pulling their hair. I didn't think I would put those in there. I don't think I have anyway. Impulse control disorders are actions that may be pleasurable in the beginning, but as the attempt to resist the impulse continues, they become harmful to the individual or others. This disorder also has accompanying tension or arousal before the act is committed. After culmination of the act, the individual often feels gratification, pleasure, relief, and then possibly remorse and guilt for not controlling the behavior. And these are compulsive behaviors. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a repetitive activity where the goal is to reduce anxiety or distress caused by the obsessive thoughts. The goal is rarely to provide pleasure or gratification and include compulsive hand washing, which is what's going on with the gentleman on the right, checking things, ordering, counting, and praying. Compulsive behaviors are engaged in for the same reason people compulsively use addictive drugs: the instant rush to forget your problems, to control anxiety, to oblige friends, to self-medicate. These individuals are trying to alter their mood and change their state of consciousness. MRIs show that the same area of the brain are activated when compulsive behavior is done as when drug use is anticipated or done. Compulsive behaviors, this is a comparison between drug users and compulsive gamblers. Drug users are compulsive about their drug use. People gamble compulsively. A drug user will develop a tolerance for their drug. Compulsive gambler increases the bet amount when gambling compulsively, and this, of course, leads to tolerance. A drug user will have a withdrawal symptom after abstinence. A compulsive gambler becomes restless when not gambling, and this is a form of withdrawal, of course. The drug user will continue to use despite adverse consequences. A compulsive gambler continues gambling until they have used all their money, and of course, this is a form of abuse. Drug users are in denial about their usage. Compulsive gamblers think they control their gambling and refuse to see the consequences. They are in denial. And drug users have a strong tendency to relapse. Compulsive gamblers will relapse whenever they have money again. One telling sign is that organizations like Gamblers Anonymous and Overeaters Anonymous use a 12-step program identical to the 12-step program set up by Alcoholics Anonymous. Addictive behavior involves a lack of individual control, and these organizations demonstrate the necessity to change their lifestyle and beliefs. Compulsive behavior, oh, wait a minute. Oh, there we go. Compulsive behavior can be triggered by various factors: genetic predisposition, environmental stress, the repetitive behavior itself. Substance abusers, compulsive gamblers, compulsive overeaters, and compulsive shoppers all show the same dopamine increase in the brain. Compulsive behavior does seem to run in families. Binge overeating has been shown to have a relationship with overactive 5-HT serotonin receptors. Twin studies support the strength of genetic factors leading to obesity. These connections were stronger than shared environmental pressures. Studies of adopted children supported the strength of genetic influences where such environmental factors such as frequency and volume of meals, amount of snack food in the house, and level of exercise was less significant than the heredity toward obesity. And the reason I have the picture to the right, these are all children who have been adopted, or they're orphans anyway. Uh, you type orphan in there, and it's just a kid, right? So anyway, researchers have found a marker gene that shows a strong proclivity for addictive behavior, especially alcoholism, and that, of course, is a DRD2A1 allele. We've talked about the DRD2A1 allele before. It appears in only 19 to 21% of non-alcoholics, 69% of severe alcoholics, 45% of compulsive overeaters, 48% of smokers, 52% of cocaine addicts, 51% of pathological gamblers, 76% of pathological gamblers with drug problems, 45% of people with Tourette's syndrome, 49% of children with ADHD. It is speculated, there's a reason for this. It is speculated that these individuals who have the DRD2A1 allele gene have a deficiency of dopamine receptor sites and therefore must seek excessive stimulation to force extra dopamine to be released in the reward reinforcement pathway to feel normal. Since their normal is less stimulating, they're easily bored. Stimulation allows them to feel pleasure. Compulsive gambling may be triggered by the plethora of venues to gamble: state lotteries, poker machines, internet betting, legal off-track betting, casinos on every corner. I went to the not the grocery store. I went to the gas station yesterday, and I was checking out. I was buying my gasoline, and right there were all of these lottery tickets. I mean, it was a plethora, literally a plethora of tickets. Anything that you want. They had baseball, basketball. I mean, it was the silliest thing you ever saw. Here I live in the state of Iowa, and in Iowa they have all these lottery tickets that look differently. If you want to, you're a baseball fan, you buy a baseball lottery ticket. It's the silliest thing in the world. They're all the same. They're all the same lottery, but they just have different pictures on them to get people to buy them. I thought that this is the silliest thing I've ever seen before. Anyway, the whole gas station was this mass casino-like place. Compulsive overeating may be triggered by the plethora of fast food restaurants, lack of daily physical activity, fats and sugars in the foods that include craving, parents overfeeding their children, chaotic childhoods that lead people to use food to relieve their depression. I live near Clinton, Iowa, and if you drive down Second Street in Clinton, within a block of one another, you've got Burger King, McDonald's, Long John Silver's, who's the Colonel Sanders Chicken, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Next door is Wendy's. Hardee's is down the road less than a block. And right across the street is Jimmy John's. So no matter what you want, you can get it right there on Second Street within about a block and a half of one another. How they jammed all those fast food restaurants in one area, it's kind of interesting because it's either a restaurant or a parking lot. And you can't go from one to the other. It's really kind of odd. So if maybe they did it because you've got kids in the car. One kid wants a Burger King, another kid wants Long John Silver's, another kid has to have his McDonald's Happy Meal, and that may be why they did it, so that you could bounce from one to the next for your kids. But it certainly seems like an idea that leads to obesity or at least overeating. Compulsive sexual activity may be triggered by a plethora of sexual situations depicted on TV, latchkey kids with no supervision, children with no close emotional family connections, and abundance of internet pornography. We're going to talk about internet pornography in just a minute. Compulsive internet use may be triggered by expanding networks of games, massive multiplayer online role-playing games. Dedicated gamers will play online for an average of 8 hours a day. Expanding networks of online gambling, expanding network of chat rooms. I used to have a student, this was when I was in Montana, and even though the internet up there was just horrible, just garbage, I mean, it wasn't really very good, this kid would start playing. He had his last class on Thursday night, and he would start playing on Thursday night, and it wasn't more frequently than not. He would start playing on Thursday night. He would play all day Friday and all night Friday. He'd play all day Saturday, all night Saturday. He would play all day Sunday and all night Sunday. And he would miss his classes on Monday because he hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days. He was staying awake drinking Monster and Mountain Dew and all kinds of caffeine drinks, and well, he eventually flunked himself out of school. But pretty soon he wasn't coming in on Mondays, and then he wasn't coming in on Tuesdays, and the only days he would be there would be Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then he was leaving early on Thursdays. I mean, it was ridiculous. This kid, he literally gamed himself right out of school. He was a smart kid too. That was the sad part. We all loved the kid, but I mean, what can you do? Compulsive shopping may pull the plug on his computer, I guess. Compulsive shopping may be triggered by the ease of getting credit, a materialistic view of life. It isn't who you are, but what you have. Barrage of advertisements on TV, catalogs. My wife must get half a dozen catalogs every day for one thing or another. She buys one thing from a place, and everybody that has any, like she'll buy flower bulbs from the place. All of a sudden, every day she's getting flower bulb catalogs, not just from the place that she bought from, but from all the other flower bulb outlets around the country. It's really kind of bizarre. So all she has to do is buy one thing, and all of a sudden, she's just buried in catalogs. 24-hour home shopping networks, internet shopping, internet auction sites. Doesn't happen to me. I buy a lot of books, and that's just about it for me. I'm not much of a shopper. And of course, you don't have, there aren't that many bookstores left anymore. Amazon's pretty much taken over all the markets. It has been observed that there is a history of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse in the lives of many of the individuals who suffer from compulsive behaviors. Engaging in the behavior can lead to compulsive behavior, a big payday when gambling. Eater takes in excess sugars and fats and changes the body chemistry. Now they eat to be happy. The other problem is that if you start consuming large amounts of sugar, if you're not consuming that much sugar every day, you feel like you're deprived. It's really kind of odd. Um, I don't really eat that much. Well, maybe I do. I have a sweet tooth, but I don't eat that much sugar. But I've been around people who they'll consume a candy bar like a Snickers or something, and they have to have one of these things every hour or every hour and a half. Whenever they have a snack, it's always a really rich candy bar. And I'm thinking, geez, I couldn't tolerate that more than once a day. If I eat a candy bar today, I'm good. I'm good for about a week of eating candy bars because that's just too rich for me. But here you've got these individuals, and they condition themselves to consume large amounts of sugar. Being able to buy something that the individual wants to make them shop with the anticipation that they want makes them shop with the anticipation that they will find another coveted item. Participation in ritualized masturbation, compulsive viewing of pornography, or participation in other compulsive sexual behavior will make the individual avoid normal sex behavior or emotional relationships. So here we have an individual, they are pleasuring themselves, therefore they don't feel like, or they're not getting the same charge out of sex with somebody else that they were getting from themselves. They can fantasize whatever they want. So instead of uh, engaging in a normal relationship, now their relationship is with themselves, and they can get a much more pleasurable. Even though it's incomplete. They get a more pleasurable relationship, and now they don't need somebody else. They don't need a relationship with somebody else. Compulsive gambling has skyrocketed in the last decade, with poker tournaments being shown on television and online gambling available. Last year, gambling revenues in the United States topped $75 billion. Last year, gambling revenues worldwide topped $125 billion. Gamblers Anonymous defines gambling as any betting or wagering for self or others, whether for money or not, no matter how slight or insignificant, whether the outcome is uncertain or depends upon chance or skill, constitutes gambling. Forms of gambling: casino-style gambling, poker, blackjack, craps, roulette, slot machines, video poker machines, horse and dog racing, jai alai, which is a game that has to do with a rubber ball that you bounce off a wall. You use a basket to catch it in and throw it. Because it's in a basket, you can get a lot of power behind it. It's a game from down in South America, really popular down in Cuba. Bingo and raffles, state-run lotteries and Keno, sports betting, both legal and illegal, Super Bowl, office pools, and betting on golf, schoolyard games like lag pennies and flip coins, bar games like liar's dice, stock speculation such as day trading, commodities and options, and internet gambling. Gambling has been around since the dawn of man. Gambling bones have been found in human habitation sites that date back 40,000 years. This was not an old world phenomenon. Mayan digs have found gambling implements that closely resemble the dice and the bones of other civilizations. Along with gambling has come attempts at prohibition. In India, they prohibited it during in 1000 BC during the Roman Empire. It was only for the aristocracy. Louis IX of France banned it in 1255. Henry VIII of England banned it in his country while he was king. And of course, during the Victorian era in the United States, it was looked down upon to the point that it became illegal all over the United States. Now, you guys don't remember any of this, but when I was born in 1949. Gambling didn't become legal in the United States until the 1970s, and it was the middle 1970s before it started. So there wasn't really wholesale gambling. You couldn't even gamble in Las Vegas. Uh, what was Las Vegas for? I'm not really sure. But they couldn't have gambling outside of the casinos. No slot machines, no lot. These were all illegal. So when I was growing up, let's see, it wasn't until the 1980s that Atlantic City came back, as weird as that is. Gambling came to the United States with the British, but the corruption and the addictive behavior made the practice unpalatable and it was banned. While it was banned in the East, as people moved across the Mississippi River, gambling was popular in the Wild West. Infected by the same corruption and Victorian morality, by 1910 it again was gone. Gambling didn't return until the 1970s. Since then, Atlantic City and Las Vegas have become gambling meccas, and Indian casinos have changed gambling attitudes, bringing in more money than the cities combined. There is gambling in 48 of the 50 states. The only two states where gambling isn't legal are the two Mormon states, Utah and Hawaii. In the 1970s, and I'll tell you, it's really kind of interesting because it was the late 1970s before this really took off. Because what happened was Jimmy Carter was president until 1976. And then in 1976, Ronald Reagan was, is that right? Ronald Reagan was the one that allowed, what happened was, this was down in Florida. The Seminole tribe tried to, they had gambling, and the state of Florida told them they couldn't do it anymore. And so they took it all the way up to the president, and the Supreme Court decided that it was the president's decision as to whether he would allow gambling. And what he did, he told the Seminole that he didn't want to have anything to do with it. They had to negotiate with the states. So the first gambling places were Indian casinos. It was a bingo parlor actually in Florida, and then the other tribes decided they negotiated with their tribes, and this is one of the reasons why then Atlantic City and Las Vegas got involved. Um, this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump is not a real fan of the American Indians because American Indians, their casinos pay better. They have better paydays, and the reason is because they can. They're not as greedy as he is, or well, that's not very nice, is it? Most casino owners, of course, are fairly greedy, but that's one of the reasons why he's not a real fan of American Indians. As strange as that sounds. Okay, so it was the 1980s before all this happened. Um, Before it really kicked in, but it didn't return until the 1970s. They allowed gambling in Las Vegas in the 70s. Atlantic City started to open up again, and then the Indian casinos became very powerful in the gambling community. And of course, the states decided that they would compete. Then they started putting together lotteries. States allowed other casinos to open. The state of Indiana, you can't. There is no gambling in the state itself, but there is gambling along the Ohio River. There are gambling boats along the Ohio River that they tax fairly heavily. I think they have a lottery now in Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, all the states are different, and the federal government washed their hands of the whole uh, idea. And so now it's the states that decide whether somebody can gamble in the state or not. Compulsive gambling, like any other addiction, comes in two forms: problem gambling and pathological gambling. Problem gambling behavior is a behavior that causes problems in an individual's life, either psychological problems, physical problems, sociological problems, or vocational problems. Pathological gambling, on the other hand, is gambling behavior that is persistent and continual and significantly disrupts all aspects of an individual's life. The real difference between problem and pathological gamblers is often the time and money that they spend doing it. Problem gamblers can't afford to spend as much time and don't have the money to gamble as they want. They average losses of $3,000 per year. Now, the reality is there's a lot of people that gamble. They can't control themselves. They're compulsive gamblers. They are problem gamblers. Most of these individuals, in order for them to, most of these individuals do something so that they can make money. And then they gamble the money. If they make more money, they just gamble that money away. This is one of the reasons why politicians, sometimes you'll see politicians, and all of a sudden the FBI will arrest them or whatever because they've started absconding with money. They've started pulling money away from whatever they have responsibility for, and that's because they have become problem gamblers. They've gambled away money. They've thought, well, I just need a couple $1,000. I'll borrow it from the slush fund, and I'll pay it back later. And of course, they never pay it back because they lose and they can't pay it back. And you see this all the time. People that work for the government having problems like this. A pathological gambler spends far more time gambling, and averages losses of $11,000 a year. The average debt for women entering Gamblers Anonymous is $60,000. The average debt for men entering Gamblers Anonymous is $100,000. If you know who Charles Barkley is, he was a basketball star for the Phoenix Suns a couple decades ago. He now is on television, which is kind of interesting because I was reading a story about people that have lost everything in their gambling by gambling, and one of the individuals was Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley would go to Las Vegas, and sometimes he'd win $1 million, and sometimes he'd lose $1 million. Eventually, all the money that he made as a Phoenix Sun, playing basketball for all those years, it's all gone. And that's one of the reasons why he's still on television. People like Michael Jordan, who is also a fairly compulsive gambler, but usually he gambles on his ability to win. His ability to win, not somebody else's ability to win. Um, he keeps his money, or he's been able to keep his money. And somebody like Charles Barkley, who gambles roulette or whatever he gambles, blackjack or Texas Hold'em, whatever. Charles Barkley's lost $30 million. Lost $30 million in his life. As interesting or not interesting as that is, studies show that the problem and pathological gamblers lose 10 to 20 times as much as non-problem gamblers. In a study in Connecticut, and you'll wonder why the hell would they ever do a study in Connecticut? What's Connecticut got to do with gambling? Well, there's a tribe up there that owns the largest indie casino in the United States. They are the Pequot. I'm trying to think what Foxfire, I think, is what it's called. Anyway, those guys make tens of millions of dollars every year from their casino. And of course, Pequot are kind of an interesting tribe. They were an eastern tribe, and they kind of disappeared in the 18th and 19th centuries. And so then suddenly they reappeared back in the 1980s, and they built this casino. I think they have a couple of casinos in Connecticut now, but they make money hand over fist. They're making a lot of money. but they have a problem. They have several different problems, but one of them is they feel guilty because people are problem gamblers and they're pathological gamblers. So that's they're the ones that finance these studies about gambling. 47% of the casino patrons were problem pathological gamblers, even though they only comprise 5% of the population. So they were the ones that were the biggest problems in their casinos. In Minnesota in 1993, it was discovered that 2% of the population generated 63% of the state gambling revenues, which is really kind of curious. Minnesota is another place that has a large Indian casino, and it's in Minneapolis, and it's owned by one of the branches of the Sioux tribe, and every member of that tribe is a millionaire, including all the children in the tribe. But they still pay out very, very well, and that's one of the reasons why so many people go to their casinos because they pay out so well. Uh, they take less off the top than somebody that is their business. The tribe, of course, could lose, and the house always wins, but the house could lose a couple times, and of course, it wouldn't make that much difference because they're not they're not as greedy as people like Donald Trump and other people that own casinos. Or he was. He doesn't own any casinos anymore. Harvard Medical School studies estimated that 125 million people in the United States gamble. 2,200,000 of these individuals are pathological gamblers. 5,300,000 of these individuals are problem gamblers. This didn't take into account the 1,100,000 adolescent pathological gamblers. Male compulsive gamblers outnumber female compulsive gamblers by 2 to 3 times. This may be changing with the increase of casinos and slot machines, as women are more likely to use gambling to escape depression, trauma, or relationship problems. Pathological gamblers tend to have other addictions. 25 to 63% of pathological gamblers have other behavior or substance addictions. One study found that 73% of pathological gamblers had alcohol problems. The same study found that 38% of pathological gamblers had a drug problem, 60% smoked, 50% had mood disorders, 41% had anxiety disorders, 60% had personality disorders. The group that has seen the greatest rise of gambling is among older adults. One survey of residential and assisted care facilities found that 16% went to casinos at least once a month. This behavior is exacerbated by casino-sponsored trips and day trips, which were found in 2/3 of the facilities. College students gamble at a higher percentage than any other group. 42% gamble, 26% gamble weekly or more frequently. Heavy college gamblers were more likely to be smokers, heavy drinkers, and or heavy marijuana users. These individuals averaged lower grades and more frequent absences. There are different types of gamblers. Recreational social gamblers are able to separate gambling from the rest of their lives. For professional gamblers, their main source of income is gambling, and because of this, they are able to and willing to take losses in their business. A good example of a professional gambler was the guy that shot up. How many people did he kill? 56 in Las Vegas. The guy that shot up the country and western concert. It was down below his hotel. Why did he do it? We don't know. Was he hitting a loss? Probably not. One of the problems, and you remember we said, what was it, 60%? 60% have personality disorders. A lot of those personality disorders are antisocial personality disorders. Antisocial gamblers may steal to gamble and have no conscience about the thievery and the corruption that they represent. And of course, that is a very serious problem. So a lot of gamblers have antisocial personality disorder. There are two subtypes of pathological and problem gamblers. Action-seeking gamblers are frenetic, excited, and are always seeking to escape. Escape-seeking gamblers are drawn to gambling machines and are often responsible for people with good jobs. Are responsible people with good jobs. But they begin gambling to escape from the emotions or just to escape boredom. The symptoms of persistent, recurrent pathological gambling: preoccupation with gambling, reliving past gambling experiences, planning future gambling, increasing the amount of money used in gambling, unsuccessful attempts at stopping or curbing gambling, restlessness and irritability when not gambling, using gambling as an escape, chasing, which is trying to recoup past losses, lying about gambling, financing gambling through illegal acts, jeopardizing job, relationship, and education to gamble, expecting others to bail out the gambler's debt. Now we're going to talk about how people become pathological gamblers. The winning phase: in the beginning, the bets are small and they are happy just to win or break even. But as recreation becomes compulsion, the reward becomes more the stimulation of the action, and they seek to prolong the action as long as they possibly can. Winning becomes secondary to staying in the game. In 70 to 80% of the cases with compulsive gamblers, the beginning to their craving for gambling started usually with a big win. Now they want that feeling again. It's just like cocaine. You snort it the first time, and you get such euphoria that you go, geez, I want to do that again. So you do it the second time. Of course, you build a tolerance to the cocaine. You don't have the same reaction. You go, I'll bet if I snort more of that stuff, I'll get that same reaction I got the first time. So you snort it again, still didn't get it. You're snorting more and more and more and more. And of course, at this point, it becomes a compulsion with you. The same way with gambling. It starts with a big win, and now you're chasing the money. You're after the gold. The gambler begins spending more time wagering, and their conversations are salted with lionizing their wins, and when mentioned, minimizing their losses. I had a friend who he wasn't really a gambler. He sold crafts. He made things, and of course, he would sell them. So he would go on a trip. He was a guy from Fort Belknap, and there's 7 different reservations in Montana, and he would travel from one to the other, and he would go see the Salish Kootenai, or he'd go and see the Northern Cheyenne, or he'd go to the Crow Reservation, or he'd go to the Sioux on Fort Peck. He just wandered all over the state, selling his crafts, his native crafts. And he'd come back, and I'd say, "Well, how much money did you make?" He'd say, "I made $500." And I'd say, "Well, how much did it cost you to go to all these places?" And he'd say, "Oh, that's not important. All that is important is that I made $500." I'd said, "Well, how much money do you have left?" And he'd say, "Well, I've got $140." Well, what happened to the rest of it? Well, he spent the rest of it on gasoline, on food, on a place to stay. So I tried to explain to him, look, you didn't make $500. You made $140 because it cost you $360 just to travel to all those places. He'd say, no, 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 you're looking at it all wrong. I made $500, and of course, I couldn't convince him. His math and my math would never come out the same because I looked at it from one perspective and he looked at it from a gambler's perspective. How much did you win? I won a jackpot of $3,000. Well, how much do you have left? Well, I don't have any of it left. I gambled it all away. This was the same guy that the last time I went up there, I was remodeling a property we owned up there. We don't own it anymore. We sold it, but we were remodeling the property. Actually, it was a house we had rented out, and the person had just trashed the place. So we were trying to put it back together, and so I hired him for $100 a day, and so I'd feed him breakfast in the morning. Then I take him out for lunch, and then we work all day. You know, we sometimes we worked a lot, and sometimes we didn't work very much. But I give him $100, and he'd say he wanted it after every day. So I give him $100, and then I'd go pick him up for breakfast the next morning, and I'd say, "Well, how much money do you have left?" He'd say, "I don't have any. I gambled it all. I gambled it all at the casino last night." And so I we were I think we were there for about 10 days. Anyway, he made about $1,000, and he lost $1,000 because every time I picked him up, he was broke again. As funny as that is. Okay, so they go through the winning phase, and they have this thing about they're always winning. They're always winning. I had another friend up at Fort Belknap. It was really kind of funny. She said, "It's my birthday. I'm going to the casino," and I said, "Oh, okay. Well, how do you do at the casino?" She says, "I always win. I win every time I go." And I said, "Well, that's impossible. I mean, that's not the law of averages would make you break even if at best, if not lose." And she said, "I never lose. I always win." And so, and every time I talked to her about her gambling, she'd say, "I always win." "Well, how much did you make last night?" "Well, I made $300. "Well, how much do you have left?" "That's not important. I have $300." So she got sick, and I was talking to her just before she died, and she said, "You kept trying to tell me that I wasn't winning every time, and I kept telling you that I was winning every time." She said, "I wasn't. I almost always lost all my money," which is kind of it's not that funny, I guess, but in the end, she admitted to me and to herself that she wasn't winning every time. The losing phase begins with a losing streak, which is inevitable due to the simple laws of chance. Their large losses are met with larger wages to try to recoup their previous losses, and this is known as chasing. As a gambler continues to lose, they will dip into depression, they will seek isolation, become irritable, and lie about their situation. Just like my friend who eventually passed away, but she would not admit that she was losing until the very end. Desperation phase. In the desperation phase, the pathological gambler may lose their job, max out their credit cards, borrow money from friends and family, perhaps turn to illegal activities to hide their addiction, theft, embezzlement, drug dealing. The gambler may bankrupt their family and suffer divorce, and this is in the desperation phase. Giving up phase. In the giving up phase, the gambler is no longer trying to recoup their losses, but seeks the game to stay in the action. 72% of gamblers experience depression when they hit bottom. Suicide attempts occurred in 17 to 24% of these gamblers when bottom was hit. This is usually the time when the gambler seeks treatment. And as we said, women don't seek treatment until they're $60,000 in the hole. Men seek treatment at $100,000 in the hole. I had a friend that he was an alcoholic, and he gave up booze, but then he became a compulsive gambler. And if he had money in his hand, he would go to the casino, and he would gamble it all away, all of it. Uh, he was very well thought of. He was a healer on the reservation. He was very well thought of, very fabulous talker. But I'll tell you what, you didn't want him to be in charge of the money for the powwow because it would all be gone. He had a pro. It wasn't that he lost all the time. It was the problem was he would gamble until it was all gone. If he had just won and stopped, then everything would have been better. But every time he got a hold of money, he didn't. He would lose it. And this was a really serious problem. You just couldn't trust him with money. One time we were at it was a veterans powwow, and I was helping. And he decided he wanted to do a 50-50 raffle. So we'd go up in the stands, and we'd give people tickets and whatnot. And then we'd have a 50-50 raffle. So I went up there. I was helping him. I was selling. He was selling. People knew him better than they knew me. So they liked to buy from him rather than me. But pretty quickly, people would say, I don't trust him. I can't trust him because money just slips through his fingers. I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, watch him, watch what he does. And so what he was supposed to be doing, he was supposed to be, he'd sell an arm's length of tickets for $5. And if he got a $5 bill, he would stick it in his left hand pocket. And if he got 5 singles, he would stick 3 of those singles in one pocket and 2 of those singles in his other pocket. And if somebody bought $10 worth, he would stick 1 5 in his left hand pocket and the other 5 in his right hand pocket. Now you're thinking, well, he's just, it's a 50-50 raffle, so 50% of the money that is going to whatever the cause is, and 50% of it goes to whoever wins the raffle. But that's not what was happening. What was happening was everything in his left-hand pocket was going into the pot, and everything in his right-hand pocket was going to him. And lo and behold, he sold a lot more than I did. And when we went down there and separated it all out, I had like $220, and he had $75. And we're going, wait a minute, Jarl, I thought you sold more than that. Nope, nope, that's all I sold. So, there was not a whole lot we could have done with it. Well, not a whole lot we could do with it anyway. You couldn't quite uh, accuse him of stealing the money, but he was. He was skimming money off the top. Kind of funny. And eventually it ended up at the casinos. What can you do? For the compulsive gambler, it isn't the money that they are seeking, but the rush from a large win and the zoning out of the gambling that the gambling out affords them. About 1/3 of the compulsive gamblers recover on their own, usually triggered by devastating financial losses. For the other 2/3 who seek treatment, the techniques used include antidepressant medication, anti-craving drugs such as naltrexone, and Gamblers Anonymous. Whoops, went the wrong way. Okay, let's not talk about those guys anymore. Let's talk about compulsive shoppers. They're a lot more fun. Compulsive shoppers and hoarders have the same craving as do gamblers and drug addicts, but in this, the high is caused by the feeling they get when they purchase an item. 74% of the time, compulsive buyers purchase items on impulse. This is it's kind of funny if my wife or I go to the grocery store and we're hungry, then we have a lot more impulse buying than if we go and we're not hungry. So we both of us try to control our hunger before we go into the grocery store. I'm not as impulsive as my wife is. She buys the strangest things, food wise, I mean. 50% of the purchase of the household income for these compulsive shoppers goes to paying their shopping debts, and that's an answer to a question on the quiz. Compulsive shoppers tend to buy items that enhance their sense of uniqueness. Women will buy jewelry, clothes, and cosmetics. Men will buy high-tech electronics and sporting equipment. Depression seems to be the main impetus behind their compulsive shopping. It seems worse during the winter holidays, so this is the time when they accrue 40% of their debt. Antidepressants reduce their urge to compulsive shop. Collecting, accumulating, and hoarding are often offshoots of compulsive shopping. The individuals gain self-worth and self-esteem from the objects that they own. These collectors and hoarders may buy valuable items, contemporary fads, or accumulate valueless items. There are cases of people who are unable to throw newspapers and magazines away. People will also hoard animals such as cats, dogs, and birds. While I was living in Montana, there's a lot of hoarders in Montana. There was one guy that hoarded goats, and he had 250 goats on like 3 acres of land. It was ridiculous. And he'd have to go there and feed them. And then one day he stopped going, and by golly, all those goats starved to death, as horrible as that is. All cats, dogs. There was this lady came down from Alaska, and she came down and she crossed back into the United States at Sweetgrass, up on the Canadian border at Sweetgrass, and she was driving a semi. Her husband was actually driving the semi, and they said, "Well, what's in that?" And it stunk. They said, "What's in the semi?" And she said, "Well, these are my dogs. I raise pedigree collies." And they opened up the back, and it was there were cages, and it was a big, it was a semi trailer, and it was full of dogs in cages. So they pulled them all out. It turned out there were 117 dogs in there, and of those 117, 17 of them were dead. And so what they did, they seized them because it was animal cruelty. That was the idea anyway. And they took them to the fairgrounds in Great Falls. Is that right? Yeah, it was Great Falls. Took them to the fairgrounds in Great Falls, and they fed them all, and they watered them all. Most of them were dehydrated. The 17 that were dead were mostly puppies. Um, they were. She said that she was doing research looking at a genetic flaw in collies, um, and this was part of her research. She was a real nutcase. Anyway, she was bringing them down to Arizona, so congratulations. She now lives in Arizona. She's probably hoarding dogs again. Anyway, they took them all away from her because they charged her with animal cruelty, and then they had to distribute them to people throughout the state of Montana. As strange as that is, we put in to get one, but we didn't. They didn't select us. I guess they decided that we weren't we we were good enough dog owners to have a collie or something. Anyway, the hoarders. And then there was this lady that had cockatiels and canaries all over her house. She lived she. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. She lived in a trailer, and there were like 330 uh, of these birds just flying all over. And of course, when birds take off, they defecate, and oh, it was a mess. It was just a mess. Anyway, they pulled them all out, and of course they took them away from her, told her she couldn't have any more birds. Of course, she was brokenhearted. She probably has another 300 birds somewhere now. Anyway, hoarders. These are hoarders. 1980, 15% of adult population in the United States were considered obese. By 2005, 33% of the adult U.S. population were considered obese. Tragically, only 33% of the adult population are of normal weight today. The average height of the United States female is 5'4", with a weight of 164 pounds. 5'4", 164 pounds. The average model in the United States is 5 inches taller, with a weight of 54 pounds less, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm going to show you pictures of women who are 5'4" and weigh 164 pounds, and I'm going to show you models standing right beside them. There you go. The lady on the left is the individual that's 5'4" and weighs 164 pounds, and the lady on the right is a model who weighs 110 and is 5'9". And there we go again. You can see how bony macaroni her legs are. The lady on the left, I mean. The lady on the right is 5'4" and weighs 164 pounds. And is a fan of Hello Kitty, obviously. And there we go. Another lady who is 5'4" and weighs 164 pounds. And the lady on the right is a model, another bony macaroni. 5'9", 110 pounds. There are 3 eating disorders: anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Anorexia nervosa is body image distortion, and an addiction to lose weight. Bulimia nervosa is eating excessive amounts of food and then controlling weight by purging, vomiting, fasting, or excessive exercise. And the last is binge eating disorder, eating excessive amounts of food with no attempt at weight control. And this, of course, is binge eating disorder. Compulsive eaters feel powerless when dealing with food. These individuals tend to be obsessed with food. They use food to escape undesirable feelings such as boredom and depression. They tend to be secretive in their behavior. They feel guilty about their eating. They are usually in denial about their eating. They continue overeating behavior despite the harm that they are doing to themselves. Eating disorders seem to be a combination of genetic, neurochemical, psychological development, and sociocultural factors. And as you can see, this lady is sitting on the toilet and eating food, and this guy is just shoveling in the spaghetti. 9.3% of the U.S. adult population is diabetic. That's 19,300,000 people in the United States. 26% of the U.S. adult population are at risk for diabetes. That's 54 million people. 15.5% of American Indian adults has diabetes. 10% of African American adults has diabetes. 6.5% of Mexican American adults has diabetes. And 5.6% of white adults has diabetes. So as you can see, this is a really serious problem for American Indians, more than anybody else. It is not uncommon for someone with an eating disorder to have a co-occurring disorder as well. 12 to 18% of anorexics abuse tobacco, alcohol, amphetamines, prescription drugs, or over-the-counter substances. 30 to 70% of bulimics abuse tobacco, alcohol, amphetamines, prescription drugs, or over-the-counter substances. There's a reason why I have Kaylee Cuoco's picture to the right. Kaylee Cuoco is was the female star of Big Bang Theory. She does yoga, is her thing. She was a tennis star when she was a teenager. The reason I have her picture here is because when she first started doing the Big Bang Theory, she was deathly afraid of having a runny nose. Well, one of the ways you can dry up your sinuses is by using a substance called Afrin. You can get it over the counter. You can find it just about any place. It's kind of like a Vicks inhaler, except it's a spray. Anyway, she was addicted to Afrin, and she finally admitted this, and she had everything taken care of. And that's the reason I have her here, is because she was addicted to Afrin. As weird as that is, it's an over-the-counter substance. I don't really know what's in Afrin, but the Air Force pilots used to use it so that they could fly. You can't fly with congested nose. If your nose is stopped up, you can potentially pop your eardrums, and that's certainly not a good idea. Anyway, she was addicted to Afrin. Most eating disorders begin during adolescence, tend to be chronic, and they affect women more than men. 3% of women suffer from one of the 3 eating disorders. In high school, 33% of girls and 16% of boys show symptoms of one of the eating disorders. The picture to the right, this is Snooki from Jersey Shores. She was a cheerleader in high school, and this is a picture of her when she was in high school. This is what she looked like when she was making the television show Jersey Shore. And then she decided to lose weight. She got married. She had a child. She decided to lose weight. She became anorexic. Hello? Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. 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 Bye. Bye. Okay, sorry about that. My wife just called. She's going to bring pizza home for supper. One of the frightening statistics dealing with anorexia is the age of the onset has dropped from 13 years to 9 years. Third grade girls are starting to diet and starve themselves to look thin. Anorexics seem to have a fear of gaining weight. These individuals tend to have a tendency to perfectionism and a low self esteem. Death rates for anorexics range from 4 to 20%. Of all of the mental illnesses, anorexia has the highest death rate, as weird as that may seem. And you can see this. I don't think she's a third grader. Anyway, she is awfully slender, way too slender. Bulimia nervosa is a disorder characterized by binge eating and the obsessively ridding oneself of the food that has been eaten. And they do this by vomiting. They use laxatives, diuretics, excessive exercise. Once upon a time, there was a famous actress by the name of Audrey Hepburn. She was known for her long and slender neck. She was in at Tiffany's. What else was she in? She was in My Fair Lady. Anyway, she was thought to be one of the most beautiful women in the world. Of course, she was very very slender. She controlled her weight by taking laxatives. Eventually, she died of colon cancer from utilizing her from stressing her colon on a relatively regular basis. Bulimia actually means ox hunger, as in hungry enough to eat an ox. When binging, these individuals eat as if they were famished to the point of uncomfortably distending their stomachs. These individuals are notorious for eating and purging in secret. A bulimic will often have secret stashes of forbidden food stashed away throughout their house that they can eat in private and purge very quickly. And that's what that picture was all about. That's what the picture of this lady eating in the bathroom is all about. She has a secret store of food. Much of the cause of bulimia in particular and eating disorders in general stems from perceptions of acceptable appearance for females on television. When television was introduced to Fiji, 3% of the women on the island vomited to stay slender. 3 years later, the percentage of vomiters was 15%. Fashion models maintain a body weight 13 to 19% below that of the women that they are modeling the clothes for. I looked this up. I was wondering, well, why in the world are they so skinny? What is it? Why do they have to be so skinny? Well, one of the reasons is because the women that they're selling these clothes to, it isn't that the women they want them to look like the women. What they want them to do is see themselves in these clothes, and they think if the more slender the individual that is modeling the clothes, the more they will see themselves as slender than they actually are. Okay, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the interesting things about models. But look at her face. You never see a model smile, as bizarre as that is. You never see a model smile. You never see a model smile. Now, why don't you ever see a model smile? And the answer is, this was in the same article where they were talking about why they have to be so skinny. I'm sorry, why they have to be so slender. And the answer is that they don't want them to smile because they don't want them to show any personality. If they showed personality, of course, then uh, it would take away from the clothes. That's the idea. If they have a personality, then the individual can't see themselves as the person wearing those clothes. It's just like having rolling a mannequin out with the clothes on them because they have no facial expressions, and so they try to maintain the lack of facial expression. As weird as that is. Wait a second, I got a cat fight. Get out of here. Okay. Sorry about that. While binging and purging may occur millions of times a week around the United States, it is not without it's a negative effects. Dental complications because of the vomit, because acidic stomach acid will eat away the teeth, the back of the teeth. Greater possibility of alcohol abuse, greater possibility of drug abuse, high rate of depression, greater risk of suicide, stomach acid burns to the esophagus and throat, loss of tooth enamel is what I was just talking about, heart problems, arrhythmias, menstrual problems, electrolyte imbalances. The problem is that for a female to ovulate, she has to maintain at least 10% body fat. If you lose too much weight, if you lose too much fat, then you will not have a period. And then it's difficult for you to get pregnant. My daughter, when she was in college, she ran track, and her roommate was a decathlete. Um, and her roommate had never had a period. She was an athlete. She'd always been an athlete, and she just never had a period. And she didn't think about it because, well, she was winning. She was winning races and whatnot. So she didn't even think about it. And then she fell in love and got married. Isn't that sweet? Um, and she couldn't get pregnant. She didn't understand why she couldn't get pregnant. Well, the reality was she wasn't having periods, so that's one of the reasons she couldn't get pregnant. But then when she gained a little bit of weight, we're not talking about getting fat. We're just talking about gaining a little weight. When she started gaining a little weight, she had such erratic periods, she still couldn't get pregnant. So eventually she divorced her husband and married somebody else. And eventually she ballooned up to, I don't know, 10 pounds above what she was her running weight, and she finally got pregnant. And the other problem, of course, is electrolyte imbalances. You can't really lose that much fluid. You lose electrolytes when you lose fluid. That's one of the reasons why people die of when they have diarrhea, is because they lose so much. They not only lose the fluid, but they also lose the electrolytes. And that's one of the things that you have to replace. And if you don't replace the electrolytes, despite the fact that they're not losing that much fluid, you will have an electrolyte imbalance and potentially they'll die. And that's one of the reasons why if somebody has really severe diarrhea, you have to put them on an IV. You need to give them D5W, you give them normal saline. You're trying to regulate their electrolytes. If somebody has diarrhea, this is a trick. If somebody has diarrhea, one of the ways to cure the diarrhea is to give them Gatorade and clear water. You give them the water to replace the fluids in their body. Give them the Gatorade to replace the electrolytes. And it's like magic. You give them a bottle of Gatorade, they drink the bottle of Gatorade, one of those little bottles. Then you give them a bottle of water, they drink the water. You give them the Gatorade the second time, and by golly, the diarrhea has gone away. One of the problems that you have, and one of the reasons people have diarrhea, is because the electrolyte imbalance causes their colon to spasm, and of course that causes them to have a problem. Binge eating disorder has become an international problem. For the first time in the history of humanity, there are as many people in the world who are overweight as those who are underweight. In the United States, where obesity is defined as more than 30 pounds over one's ideal weight, obesity has increased from 15% in 1980 to 33% in 2005. I tried to look up figures. There's no new figures. This is a lady when she was overweight, and this is a lady after she lost 30 pounds. So as you see, there's a difference. She's smiling here, and she's not smiling there. Okay. Anyway, before and after pictures. Binge eating disorder affects 4.6% of the population at large. Binge eating is eating until the individual is uncomfortably full. People tend to be eating in response to emotional states rather than the true hunger signals. And as you can see, this is a fairly slender lady, but why in the world is she eating a whole plate of chocolate chip cookies? These individuals tend to have frequent episodes of eating large quantities of food, feeling a lack of control where food is concerned, eating rapidly and swallowing food without chewing, eating despite being uncomfortably full, eating when not feeling hungry, eating away from others so that they won't see their volume of intake, feeling disgusted because of the lack of control of food, having a preference for high carbohydrates and foods with high fat content, junk food. Binge and compulsive eaters do not seem to know how to pace themselves, eating rapidly and in massive amounts until they feel painfully uncomfortable. Such eating may be done to control anxiety. Full seems to have a calming and sedating effect on some food. Food seems to have a calming and sedating effect on some people. Adolescents who eat when they are depressed are twice as likely to suffer from obesity or bulimia. They are also twice as likely to suffer from anorexia. Compulsive overeaters are more likely to suffer from high blood pressure, high cholesterol, circulatory problems, heart disease, type 2 diabetes. 15 million Americans have type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, gallbladder disease, gout, arthritis, 15 to 60% greater risk of cancer. They exhibit high rates of depression. They become distressed and develop a negative body image. They allow their self-esteem to suffer badly. Who was I talking to? I was talking to one of my students at Ashford when I was up at Ashford, and this individual said, I had my gallbladder taken out when I was 17. I said, well, that's kind of weird. 17-year-olds usually don't lose their gallbladder. What happened? And she said, I used to go to school. When I went to school in the morning, I would buy a bag of those really hot Cheetos, flamin' hot Cheetos. And I would eat the bag of flamin' hot Cheetos and I would down it with a monster caffeine drink. And she said, that's all I ate. And that's all I would eat all day so that I could stay slender. And then there's something in one of those that caused her gallbladder to blow out. And she got gallbladder disease. And she lost her gallbladder at age 17. That's really kind of weird. Usually, what your gallbladder is for, your gallbladder puts bile into your stomach and cholecystokinin. It helps you digest fats. And evidently, there's a lot of fat in flamin' hot Cheetos. Anyway, that was all she was eating. She didn't eat anything else. She was just eating the Cheetos and drinking the monster drink. And she was an athlete, and later on that night she would have something else. But that was all that was in her stomach for an extended length of time. Anyway, she had gallbladder disease and she lost her gallbladder at age 17. Sexual addiction is marked by sexual behavior that the individual has little control over and little choice. This type of behavior might be practiced by young or old, gay or straight, and male or female. The addiction not only includes sexual contact with another individual, but arousal through masturbation, viewing pornography, serial affairs, phone sex, visits to topless bars, visits to strip shows. Sometimes sexual addiction can involve illegal activities such as prostitution, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, exhibitionism, and that's what this guy's doing, it's exhibitionism, child molestation, rape, or incest. By 2007, there were over 4 million pornographic sites on the internet. That number has actually gone down. What did I read yesterday? 3.6 million pornographic sites. 40 million Americans visit these sites regularly. 70% of the visits are during work hours. 10% of the people surfing the porno sites are addicted to online pornography and spend up to 8 hours a day viewing sexual material. Worldwide, the pornography industry clears $57 billion a year. In the United States, the pornographic industry clears $12 billion a year. Much of the pornography is filmed and photographed in San Fernando Valley outside of Los Angeles. This is really weird because that's where my son used to live. His next door neighbor was a producer of pornographic films. As weird as that is. And the person on the other side of that person was one of the stars of the pornographic movies. While he was staying there at this house, the lady who was the pornographic star had uh, she had fat taken out of her body. What am I thinking of? What's the word for that? I can't think of it off the top of my head. Anyway, she had this fat taken off of her body and put into her breasts. It was really kind of weird. She was engaged to this guy. This guy was really rich. She was engaged to this guy, and she wanted to look good for him. So she had all of this cosmetic surgery done. Anyway, and she had plumped up her lips. So for a couple days, so so it was weird. I went to visit my son, and he said, "Oh, this is my neighbor." And she called him up, and she said, "I need you to come over because, I can't move." They had after they've had this surgery done, they have to wrap them in these bandages. Anyway, I went over there. We went over there, and this lady was standing there, and she was all wrapped up except for her chest, which she was exposed. And of course, she didn't think anything about it because she exposed herself all the time. But it was really kind of weird. Some new person comes into the house and this lady's walking around topless. It was really kind of bizarre. Anyway, I can't remember what she wanted. She dropped something and she wanted him to pick it up or something because she couldn't pick anything up. Real ouch, really weird. Cat just bit my ear. Okay. 3.3 to 6% of the U.S. population are sex addicts. He didn't live there very long. Um, yeah, well, he didn't live there that long, I guess. Anyway, now he lives in North Carolina, and he teaches math. As a matter of fact, he taught statistics at Diné College last summer. So there you go. You may have taken his class. 3 to 6% of the U.S. population are sex addicts. 80% of the sex addicts are male. Sexual addiction usually starts in the teen years and then peaks between ages 20 to 40, after which it slowly declines. Sexual addicts seem to suffer from other addictions in conjunction with their sexual problems. The DSM-5 identifies several paraphilias: exhibitionism, fetishism, voyeurism, pedophilia, sexual masochism, sexual sadism, transvestites, fetishism, and voyeurism. Let me explain what all these are. Exhibitionism is where you display yourself, your nude self, to somebody who gets shocked by seeing you naked. Fetishism is, there are lots of different fetishes. That means getting sexual gratification from something that usually doesn't cause people to be sexually excited. Voyeurism is getting sexual pleasure out of rubbing up against other people. Pedophilia is being sexually excited by underage individuals. Sexual masochism is where you enjoy being hurt. Sexual sadism is where you enjoy hurting other people. You get sexual satisfaction from it. Transvestic fetishism is dressing like the opposite sex. And voyeurism is getting sexual gratification from watching people in sexual situations. This is a scene from Psycho on the right. This is Anthony Perkins' character. He's looking through a hole in the wall and he's watching this individual undress. Uh, if you've ever seen Psycho, a really strange movie, Psycho. Anyway, it's about voyeurism, and this individual is a voyeur. He owns a motel. This individual, the lady, has rented a room, and he's put her in the room where he can watch her undress. And he watches her undress. She goes and takes a shower, and while she's in the shower, he murders her. Anyway, and that's not what voyeurism. Voyeurism is just watching people in a sexual situation. Other sexual addictions include love addiction, the desire to fall in love and be in love, relationship addiction, the need to be in a relationship with an individual that may mean maintaining multiple relationships at any one time. Individuals suffering from any sexual addiction maintain little or no control over their behavior despite adverse consequences. The individual will continue to obsess over the behavior to the distraction of everything else. Love addiction is really kind of weird. We didn't know that this existed, and then there was a lady. This lady was a librarian at Purdue University, and when she died, they went in and they cleaned out her house, and one of the things they discovered was she wrote her in her will. She made a declaration that she had always loved this man, and that they had an affair for, I don't know, 25 years or something. He was a professor at the institution. He was a world-renowned agricultural scientist. He had won all these awards, and she claimed that she was his lover, he was still alive. She's the one that had died. Anyway, she'd been a librarian, and she had when they went through her house, they found all of these. They found things that he had touched. He had checked out a book, and she had stolen the card out of the book. And he didn't even know who she was. That was the bizarre part. She had this strange obsession for him, and claimed that he actually was in love with her, and he didn't even know who she was. He'd never met her before. He had checked books out of the library, and maybe she was the one that checked him out, but he didn't notice who it was. It was on the other side of the desk. Anyway, that's what love addiction is. That's how they discovered it. We've seen other instances of this. The individual that tried to assassinate, John Hinckley Jr., tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan. And the reason he did it was because he was trying to get attention from Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster had been in Taxi, the movie Taxi. She had played a 12-year-old prostitute, and he fell in love with her from watching that movie. When she went to Yale University, he tried to get into Yale, couldn't get into Yale. But he went to where Yale University is. I can't think where it is. And he lived there, and he kept slipping poetry under her door. And she actually did know who he was. She had met him a couple times, but she didn't put two and two together, understanding that this is the person that was writing the poetry. She just met him, and that was about it. Anyway, that's a love addiction. That's what a love addiction is all about. Compulsive sexual behavior is repeated because of the release of the pleasure-inducing neurotransmitters dopamine, enkephalin, and endorphin. Tolerance to these neurotransmitters leads to a need for the addict to spend more and more time in their sexual activity to gain the same mental benefits. Damage can be done to their careers, their relationships, their self-image, and their peace of mind. And of course, there's just tons and tons of stories about individuals who have had this problem. The Boston Strangler was a rapist, and his wife, on the stand, when she testified, she said that she would have sex with him 3 and 4 times a day, and he still wasn't satisfied. And that's why he would go and do what he did. Now, she didn't know that. She thought he was masturbating. She didn't realize he was going out and raping and strangling women and doing other horrible things to them. But that's one of the instances of this compulsive sexual behavior. He was needing to have some kind of sexual release a dozen times a day, as weird as that is. The sexual addiction becomes a driving force in the addict's life. Part of the drive for the addict may be the risk that they are taking to achieve their target behavior. You can think of exhibitionism, displaying themselves to various select individuals. Usually, the addict will culminate the behavior through orgasm, though in some cases it may involve exposure or fondling. The trigger behavior is often followed by remorse, guilt, fear of discovery, of course, resolution to stop the behavior. There was a football player, played for the San Diego Chargers, and eventually he played for the Dallas Cowboys, but he was an exhibitionist. And while he was in college and he was doing these things, they kind of swept it under the rug because he was such a good football player. While he was playing for the Chargers, they kind of did the same thing. If he ever got caught, they would pay the person off or talk them into not turning him in. But he got caught. One day he got caught at a playground, and he had exposed himself to some underage girls. And the police came before anybody could take care of the situation. And of course, Lance Allworth was the guy's name. Anyway, he was a Hall of Fame level football player, and of course his reputation just tanked after that. And of course, I don't think he's in the Hall of Fame. Anyway, got caught, and finally they couldn't sweep it under the rug. The sexual behavior is often pursued with a sense of desperation, self-loathing, despair, and low self-image. Of course, there was always a fear of discovery, and it's part of that fear of discovery that is part of the stimulation to their behavior. Internet addicts seem to have no control over their need to log on. While the internet didn't really begin until 1993, today 4.5 billion people worldwide out of 7 billion people are connected to the internet. 15 to 20% of the 1 billion people have high-speed connections. In Canada and the United States, 90% of the populations are connected to the internet. And this is one of the reasons, high-speed connections, this is one of the reasons why 5G is so important. This is one of you guys have 3G, if I'm not mistaken, on the reservation. They're trying to increase it to 4G. Of course, it's not going to be 5G for an extended length of time. But anyway, this is one of the things everybody wants faster and faster connections. In Canada and the United States, 90% of the populations are connected to the internet. 90% of the population, of the two populations. The three main uses of the internet are gaming, of course, seeking erotic material, and gambling. The internet is anonymous, it's inexpensive, kinda. It's controlled by the user, it's validating, it's rewarding, it's convenient, and it's escapist. And this is one of the reasons why people troll other individuals. They can do it without anybody ever figuring out who they are. Symptoms of internet addiction include logging on at every chance at home or work. Non-addicts log on an average of 8 hours a week. Addicts may log on 40 plus hours a week. Obsessing about the internet, feeling irritable and anxious when not online. Time online increases to make the individual feel they have had enough. Losing track of time when online. Neglecting responsibilities to be online. Allowing relationships to deteriorate without spouses, coworkers, family, and friends. Posting more messages and downloading more and more data. Eating in front of the monitor. Checking email frequently, more than once a day. And that is one of the reasons why if you email me, it might be tomorrow before I get to it. Some people, I used to have a colleague at at uh, at Dene College who had it on her telephone. So every time somebody emailed her, she got it all right away, and she answered it right away. I always thought that was a little strange. I guess maybe I'm the strange one because I don't feel like. I mean, this is communication. And I don't believe communication, unless you're calling somebody on the telephone, has to be immediate. I know you guys aren't used to that, but sorry, I'm kind of old school, I guess. Some internet addicts seek oblivion, wanting to zone out, while others seek frequent or constant interaction. Physical symptoms of internet overuse include blurred vision, chronic lack of sleep, twitching mouse fingers, relationship problems. The list of internet addictions includes cybersexual addiction, computer relationship addiction, internet compulsions, information addiction, computer games addiction. And I'll have to admit, um, I'm a political scientist. I have another avocation. It's political science. And I'm really interested in what's going on as far as the election is concerned. I will have to admit that I do check the news every time I go on the computer. Every time I turn the computer on, one of the first things I do is check the news to see if anything new has happened, because there's so much out there, and this president has just driven me crazy because it seems like he's always saying crazy, or he's saying provocative things, and of course, this is uh, this is part of my information addiction, is finding out what has Trump done now. Computer relationship addiction entails individuals dealing more and more in their online fantasy world. They pull more and more away from the real relationships until they lose those relationships. Eventually, the addict's cyber world replaces and becomes the most important aspect of their life. For online gamers, the game might start offline, and then as they improve, they need the competition of the online games. Like any other online addiction, gamers lose track of time while they are playing. Some gamers will spend every free moment gaming. Men, teenagers, and children play online more than any other groups, whereas non addicts will spend 20 to 60 minutes playing a game. A gamer will average 6 hours a day in their games. And I think that's probably low at these days. Um, well, I guess you can't do that every day. My daughter was married to an individual who was a gamer, and she didn't realize how much gaming he was doing. Um, so she married. So she lived with this guy for a while, and everything was fine, and everything was fine. Then she married him, and he was military, so he was on the GI Bill, and he was going to school, and she tried to get him to get a job, but he said, "Well, I need to get through school first." What he was doing, instead of going to school, he was waiting until she left the house, and then he was doubling back, and he was staying at home and gaming all day. And before she came home from work, he would he would leave, and then he would come back as if he'd been at school all day. And he did this for a number of months before one day she came home early, and there he was playing a game. Uh, and he of course he told her, well, they didn't have class today, and of course, as soon as his grades came out, he wasn't passing anything because he wasn't spending any time at school. Uh, that's part of it. And then another time she came home, and he kept using the same excuse. Well, we didn't have class today, or I didn't feel very good. Eventually, she divorced him because she figured he was a wastrel. For the last 60 years, the most frightening non substance addiction was television addiction. TV addicts may easily spend 6 to 8 hours a day watching. 60% of American homes contain three or more televisions. In many American homes, the television is on longer than their lights. The benchmarks for television addiction: compulsive use, making the individual a couch potato; using television to change one's mood, sedative or antidepressant; craving the use of the television, loss of control, continued use despite adverse consequences, development of tolerance. The average adolescent watches TV for 1,500 hours a year as compared to 900 hours of school. The shows that an addict watches skews how they see reality and leads them to make poor decisions. Since television shows dysfunction as normal, adolescents have a hard time accepting their own culture as real. Commercials for fast foods may lead to compulsive fatty food consumption. News focus on negative events leads the individual to skew towards seeing the world as an especially dangerous place. A study in New Zealand showed that the more the child watched television between ages 5 and 15, the less likely they were to graduate from high school or go to college. And this is this is where New Zealand is. You can see there's Australia right there, or this is a joke. Anyway, this is where New Zealand is off the coast of Australia. There are over 260 million cell phone users in the United States. There are over 6 billion cell phone users around the world. I looked this up. I thought this may be an old figure, but it was 200 million before, and I changed it to 260 million. Calling and texting takes up a large part of a teenager's day to the exclusion of studying or engaging in face-to-face relationships. One of the reasons that I want people in my 350 class to read a book is because they don't read anything except their cell phones. And that is the end of the chapter. Okay, this has been a long chapter. So stay safe. I'll see you later. And next week we'll tackle chapter 8.